In the spring of 2016, the Golden Gate Men's Chorus commissioned a piece from San Francisco composer and film scorer Stephen Maine. Today, we are in Piedmont, California, to speak with the composer about the piece he wrote, entitled Welcome Love.
Stephen, how did GGMC come to commission this piece from you? What has been your association with the chorus?
Well, I've known Joe Piazza, the director of GGMC, probably for about 25 or 26 years now. And Joe had approached me about the commission, and initially he thought of it potentially as a piece almost for a Valentine's Day concert. It actually worked out differently in the end, but that was the initial idea that he and I had discussed. And so we knew we wanted it to be about love. And I asked Joe a little bit more about the kinds of details he was looking for, and he told me he didn't want a very sort of quiet, introspective piece, because I think he felt that he probably had enough of that on the program. So what he really wanted was something that had kind of the exuberance of love, and particularly maybe something that would open up a show. No better way to open up a show than with the word welcome. And I knew that as far as sources of text had gone, that Rūmī, who's of course a Persian poet, and Rūmī wrote often about love, and he wrote about it in a very interesting way. I'm theologically trained as well, that's what my degree is in, so I knew about Rūmī not only as the poet of lovers, but also Rūmī, the theological poet, because an important thing about the way Rūmī's poetry works is that he's talking about the love for one human being to another, but at the same time, he's always talking about the love of a human being for the divine. And these two are sort of held in tension in his poetry. But one of the things that I found so strong about the text anyway is that it wasn't just talking about love or one or two aspects of love. It was talking about love in terms of death, conflict, joy, of course, peace, transcendence. And I tried to bring out all of those different elements because, as I thought about it, if you welcome love, you welcome all of that. And I thought that was one of the real strengths of the text.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into composing and maybe some of your musical influences?
Well, I started life as a violinist and actually at conservatory I trained as an organist. But beyond both of those things, I often think that the beginning of my conscious musical life was when I was a boy soprano in a very fine choir of men and boys in New York City. I think that all instrumentalists would probably say that we are imitating the voice at all times. That's our goal. Even if you're a percussionist, that's true. And so one of the things that I think singing gives a composer is the sense of the importance of the lyrical line, and not just chords, but also melody and how melody reigns supreme. The other thing is that when you're singing in the choir, like I was when I was a kid, you're in a section, and you're in the soprano section, and altos are in the altos, and so forth. And so you very early on get a sense of music as counterpoint. That is to say, one group of people playing off another group and sort of trading a melody back and forth. Somebody gets the harmony sometime, and then another time somebody else does. This is all part of the way that I look back now and realize I later grew into being the kind of composer that I am, where counterpoint is extremely important to me. I tend to really attach a lot of significance to what I call the atmosphere of a piece of music. Now, if a piece of music has a film accompanied with it, then that's easy, because then the music is in service of the film. But I feel the same way about a choral piece, because in that case the music is in service of the text. And so for that reason, when I teach with my students and also when I write, I'm very committed to what's called word painting. And the basics of word painting, or text painting sometimes it's called, is that if the text is talking about going up the stairs, you don't want to have the music going down. You want the music to always support whatever the text is doing. So, for instance, in Welcome Love, there are places where the text talks about conflict. And in those moments, I made the meter, the rhythm of the piece, get very jagged and unstable. And then there are other places where the text is speaking of serenity and peace and the joy of one another, and there the music reflects that as well.
So Welcome Love has this very recognizable, repeating musical phrase that introduces each thought of your composition. Can you talk about that, or maybe even play it for us on the piano, and talk about what you were trying to accomplish with that?
Rūmī wrote a poem, and he didn't write it in terms of stanzas or verses. He wasn't thinking that way. But for the effectiveness of the piece, I wanted to have it be in what we call strophic form, like verses and choruses. So I made sure to have a tune that would keep repeating itself so that the listener would feel like, ah, there we are again, there's the tune. So the tune after the Welcome Love is... And that later repeats in different keys. But it keeps on coming back. So it keeps coming back in different keys and in different kinds of meters, but it's the tune every time, and I think that that's sort of an organizing principle for the piece.
There's also a section where the music attempts to imitate a lute. Can you tell us a little bit more about your inspiration there?
So one of the interesting things about Rūmī's time is that the lute, the Arabic instrument, was really coming into its heyday. It's thought it comes from an Arabic word alud, meaning the wood or the wooden instrument, the wooden thing. And I just happened to bring a lute here today. I've been a lute student for the past couple of years, and I am a great lover of it, probably more of a lover than I am an excellent player. But I did bring one along, and one of the interesting things about the lute, apart from the fact that it's ultra cool, is that it's actually very different from a guitar in one very important way, which is that the back is made out of staves. In this case, it's yew is the wood. And they make a very particular kind of very haunting and resonant sound. But they also make the thing kind of slippery to play. And if you put it in your lap, and not to make this a lute lesson, but it tends to slip out unless you get used to it. It sort of doesn't hold up like a guitar does. The reason this is important, and had I not had a few lute lessons in my life, I never would have known this about the text. Rūmī writes at one place, I want, speaking to the beloved, I want to hold you close like a lute, so we can cry out with longing. And on the face of it, that sounds nice enough. What I realized as I read it more is that, oh, he actually would have known what a lute was. And he would have also known that I want to hold you close like a lute, because unlike the guitar, the lute slips out of my grasp unless I hold it fairly close. But if I hold it too close, then I can't play because I'm gripping the instrument to me. I thought that was almost a lesson in itself. Basically, it's saying that in some mysterious way, the process of being a lover is about holding someone close, but not so close that you can't make harmony together. And so I took that to be a lesson, and I was grateful for the fact that I had some lute experience and could sort of see where he was going with that.
Would you be willing to give us a little sample of what the melody from that part of Welcome Love would sound like played on the lute?
Sure, I'll give it a shot. It'll make my very 21st century piece sound a little bit like something from the 1600s. That's just one little part.
Thank you. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
So there's some really interesting stuff that goes on in this text. Rūmī's sort of throwing all kinds of stuff at us, including stones. Tell us a little bit about that and how that got set in your music.
Well, I was delighted to find that piece of the text. So the words are, you would rather throw stones at a mirror. Then it's followed by, I'm your mirror, here are the stones. Because I thought, wow, this is the only opportunity I'm going to have in a love song to talk about conflict and actually have a fight, which is what it is. And I think what Rūmī is saying there is that love, in a sense, is a hall of mirrors, or perhaps post-Freud, we would say it's a lot of projection. When you're most angry or cross with your beloved, chances are really good, any good psychologist would point out, that you're probably rejecting a part of yourself. And I think that that's part of what Rūmī is pointing to here, so that the effect is that the lover says to the beloved, you'd rather throw stones at a mirror, which of course is what's really happening when you're throwing stones at someone you love. You're really throwing stones at a mirror. You're throwing stones at some part of yourself that is being rejected. And then, with a wonderful sense of solicitous grace, the lover says, I'm your mirror. Here are the stones. As if to say, it's okay. I even will allow you to throw stones at me because I understand how this experience of love works.
Stephen, musically, how do you approach a piece like Welcome Love when you're writing for a men's chorus? What types of things did you take into consideration writing for GGMC?
One of the things that I love actually about writing any commission is exactly what we're talking about, which is that you work with a community. And that's what makes commissions so much more interesting and so much more stimulating than just writing a piece sort of into the void for a publisher. You get to know the choir, you get to know their strengths, you get to know their peculiarities, and just the way the director himself, in this case Joe, approaches music, approaches the choir, what he wants out of a piece too. And one of the things I enjoy about writing for an ensemble that I know is I feel like it's not just a one-way street, but that I can grow a composition from the ground up with the input of the ensemble itself. One of the great things about GGMC is that it's got, as a choir, it's just got an enormous range. I've sung in choirs all my life, but I hadn't spent a lot of time singing in men's choirs, TTBB, tenor, tenor, bass, bass. And I think, like a lot of people probably do, that it's a very limited range, because after all, they're all guys. In fact, one of the great surprises of writing for men's choir in general, but especially this men's choir, is that the range is so much larger than that. So for instance, there are actual sopranos and altos in this choir, because we've heard of male altos, but we haven't always heard of grown men who can sing in that incredibly high range, even up to the soprano. Basses, of course, in this choir also go down very, very low. So one of the great pleasures for me was realizing I had this enormous palette, which, by the way, you don't have if you're writing for an SATB choir, a soprano, alto, tenor, bass made of men and women, because the good thing about a men's choir is that the guys who are singing the very high parts in falsetto, they can, when needed, go into their, what we call chest voice, and sing along with the basses and baritones. Women sopranos, of course, can't do that. So I exploited that effect, and in the beginning and in several places, I got all of the guys singing together in sort of a broad unison, and then in other places, we go into a full kind of divided SATB kind of writing. And that's actually a thing that you can't do with a choir of men and women.
You've had a chance to hear Welcome Love now, and I wonder, now that you've been also part of the audience hearing the piece, is there anything that you took away from that? Any thoughts now that you've heard it performed live? And also just thinking to others who will get a chance to hear this piece, what would you want an audience member to take away?
One thing I'd want them to take away is just how incredibly beautiful this poem is, or this set of poems. The other thing that I would want them to realize is that whoever the accompanist is that they heard playing that day is an awesome pianist, because I actually wrote a fairly demanding part, and I was that amazed when Fred Cummins just carried it off with panache. I think that I would want them to get, because there are quiet moments in the piece too, but in the end there's sort of a joyful recapitulation which brings home the sort of essential exuberance of love. And so I hope that they would sort of feel that and get the impact of that. And of course, as a composer, I hope they walk out whistling the theme. I've been told sometimes I write earworms, and I take that to mean it's a nice compliment, but I think what it means is that in those moments I was able to write melodic material that married with the text particularly well and made it memorable. And if I've done that, again, then I've done my job right.
Is there anything else that you would like to say about your experience writing this commission for Golden Gate Men's Chorus?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Joe and the choir itself and the board for commissioning me to write this piece of music, but also, even beyond that, just for commissioning composers for new works at all, because I think it's a terrific idea. There are many choirs and ensembles which never do such a thing, and I'm not sure why they don't. There are lots of composers who would jump at the opportunity to write for a fine ensemble like GGMC, and as I said earlier, one of the great things about a commission is that you get to sort of home grow a piece that's absolutely, perfectly, precisely tailored to the group, to whatever the instruments are, and to sort of really work with and showcase the group in question. So I'm glad that GGMC does that. I wish more ensembles would, and I hope that they're setting an example for that.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon about Welcome Love, a commission by the Golden Gate Men's Chorus. Thank you, Stephen May.
Thank you. My pleasure.